Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Be Built by Broser, live here from Gold's Gym, Venice. I want to thank everybody for watching, like we always do. And on today's show, what I want to show you guys is some shoulder exercises. Today Dave and I trained some chest and shoulders, so I figured that we do some shoulder stuff. I want to show you two movements for the rear deltoids and two movements for the anterior deltoids. Movements that are a little bit outside the box, like I like to say, a little different than the norm. Maybe they'll work for you, maybe they won't, but give them a try. I think it's something a little bit different. And then of course we'll end the show with a couple of Ask Merlin questions, one of them on Sarms, very interesting question. Thanks for watching again. Okay, so the first exercise we're showing you here is for the anterior deltoids. This is a 2-arm cable front raise on an incline bench. We have the incline bench set to a high level today, about 70 degrees. What he's doing is he's keeping his arms just very, very slightly bent. He's raising straight up and inward towards the middle of the chest. This helps to give a good contraction, good squeeze on the anterior deltoid. This movement helps to keep your body in a fixed position, so it's very, very strict. Isolates the front deltoid very, very well. And also it provides a stretch at the bottom and a hard contraction at the top, as you can see, because these are cables and not dumbbells. A really, really great movement for the front shoulders. Okay, so this is another version of a cable front raise, but this time we're going to be laying back on an incline bench, very, very low. It's set very low. It's almost parallel to the floor, just a little above parallel to the floor. This helps to provide a very, very full range of motion all the way down from the bottom of the abdominals all the way up overhead. You could actually go even a little further ahead if your shoulders have that mobility, which will bring the front shoulders and the traps into play. We're using a rope, and because the hands are turned in towards each other, it actually eliminates some of the medial deltoid and isolates the front deltoid a lot more. Very tough isolation movement. Do not try to go too heavy and use a full range of motion. Okay, so this next exercise is for the posterior deltoids. Again, we're using an incline bench. This is great for setting angles. We have it set up to about 70 degrees, 75 degrees. As you can see, the way he's holding the dumbbells, the palms are facing back. Again, this is another way of taking the medial deltoids, the side of the deltoids, out of the movement and better isolating the posterior delts. What he's doing is just raising the elbows up out to the sides, keeping a slight bend in the arms. And this is really giving a good squeeze at the top to the rear of the shoulder and building that cap into the rear of the shoulder. Another movement where you can't go too heavy, otherwise you won't get any range of motion. It's already a rather short range of motion, but it's really, really excellent for really nailing the back of the shoulder. Give that one a shot. Okay, so this final movement again is for the posterior or the rear deltoid. It's actually a play on like a 1-arm high cable row, but the key here, as you can see, his torso is turned, and by turning his torso into this position, he's really eliminating much of the back and making sure that he hits primarily the rear deltoid. You will involve some traps, but he's focusing on not coming back too far, because if he comes back any further than this, he'll start to hit the mid traps. And we're focusing here on the rear deltoid. This is a different kind of movement than a lateral, but it isolates really, really well, and it gives you a completely different feeling in the posterior deltoid from normal movements. Since a lot of people are lacking development in the posterior deltoids, it's important to give them a really, really good hit. And don't just think of them as an afterthought after your regular shoulder workout. Make sure to give them as much tension as you give either two heads, and this is a great movement to do that.
Hi Merlin, you got any good questions this week?
Yeah, I got a question about Sarms, which I'm going to address here. I was asked about Sarms in contest preparation. It basically said I'm switching from drug-tested shows into NPC shows. I am not ready to use traditional anabolics, but I would like to use Sarms in preparation for the show. What Sarms would you recommend for a beginner cycle? and what do you think of them? So, first of all, let me just say that, when it comes to Sarms, I'm not prescribing anything. I'm just making recommendations based on, what I read, what I see people doing, what I know people doing in the industry. The whole thing with Sarms is still such a young science, and there's really not a lot of, or if any, scientific evidence about how they work in bodybuilders. Obviously, they were developed by pharmaceutical companies, so there's a lot of evidence of their muscle building properties, their bone building properties, and what they're really meant for therapeutic use. But all the things that we have on bodybuilders and preparing for shows and putting on tremendous amounts of muscle really is more anecdotal and in the trenches type stuff. So basically, do I think Sarms work? Do I think that they're good? Yes, they are. I think that if I was going to put some sort of percentage on it, I think they're maybe about 50% as powerful as traditional anabolics or prescription anabolics. Some of the ones that are good for contest prep, first let's start with, I kind of got the sense from reading more of your question that you kind of want to do like a size gaining phase and then a phase where you kind of cut up. So the best ones for gaining size from what I've seen is LGD 4033 and also RAD 140. Those seem to be rather effective for putting on good amounts of muscle mass in a short period of time. Also YK11, which is a myostatin inhibitor. Obviously, if you inhibit myostatin, you're going to kind of take the brakes away from the body, where pretty much the body produces myostatin to keep us from getting too much bigger, but if you inhibit it, then obviously your body is a little bit more turbocharged, so you can put on some size. So those are pretty good for adding muscle mass. I would say for the purposes of cutting up, some good fat burners would be cardarine. Generally the dosage for most people is somewhere between 10 on the low end and 30 milligrams on the high end. Cardarine usually split up into 2 separate doses. There's another product called Stenabolic, which is similar to cardarine in its properties, its fat burning properties, and its endurance enhancing, cardio enhancing properties, but it's more of a short term, so it's something you take before workouts. It does stack well with cardarine, and it's taken in doses of about 10 to 20 milligrams. MK677 is a growth hormone secretagogue. So if you're going to, generally guys use a growth hormone, not so much for muscle building, even though it does work synergistically with anabolics for muscle building, but it's great for burning fat. So this is a secretagogue. It's pretty darn powerful, so it is excellent for burning fat. Most people will take somewhere between 25 and 50 milligrams a day, sometimes split up morning and evening, sometimes just taken in the morning, sometimes taken in the evening. You got to see how you react to it. For shows, something like S23 is a SARM that has been kind of said that it's sort of like a Winstrol in its effects, 20 to 30 milligrams a day of that, taken in divided doses. Also anadrine, or S4, is something that's been related to something kind of like Anavar. That'll be taken in dosages of 25 to 50 milligrams a day. Just got to be careful with that one, because it actually can, for some people, cause a side effect where their eyesight gets kind of blurry. They kind of see at night. Their vision is impaired, so if you're driving and it's dark outside, some people get that problem with S4. And basically, so those are, generally the ones. There are other SARMs. Some people have their favorites, some people who feel that some work better than others, but those are some good ones for getting a little bigger and for preparing for a show, burning body fat and hardening the muscle. But again, this is all in its infancy. A lot of this is hearsay and anecdotal evidence, but that's pretty much what I'm seeing out there, and they do work rather well. I know a lot of people who've gotten ready for NPC shows and placed top 5 or better on just SARMs alone. So they are powerful products, but again, they are drugs. They do have some side effects, and they should be taken with caution.
Thanks, Biggie.
So I got another question. This was regarding whole body inflammation and what its effects are and how you can deal with it. Now, when we're talking about inflammation, what the question was asked, we're not talking about acute inflammation like, from an injury or from being sore from training. We're talking about whole body inflammation, the kind of inflammation that occurs over time and that can lead to serious problems like heart attack, like stroke, cancer, and other, really, really bad diseases. In fact, after I had my heart attack almost a year ago, some of the physicians that I talked to were actually explaining to me that one of the major things to take care of is whole body inflammation. And that sometimes this is a little known cause of things like heart attacks. Sometimes they're pointed towards cholesterol levels or high blood pressure, but it's the inflammation that you have to get rid of. So it is a serious problem. It occurs in people. Obviously, some people have genetic predisposition to it. Some people's diets are too high in saturated fats or too high in trans fats. Some people's diets are too high in sugars, certain sugars, especially fast-acting sugars, like those that would be like in white rice, white potatoes, candy, high fructose corn syrup, things like that. Red meat. Just these types of foods can actually contribute towards inflammation. So what you can do about it, obviously, is make sure that you're exercising, make sure that you're doing your cardio, those types of things, that you're also dealing with stress. Stress can cause inflammation if it's in too high amounts. So you should be dealing with your stress. You should be getting a lot of sleep. But you can also take anti-inflammatory supplements, which is something that I do now. And I make use of things like turmeric, pomegranate, blueberry, grapeseed, and a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, among other things. So I pretty much look now to keep inflammation low. I also make sure that I only take in carbohydrates first thing in the morning and after training when insulin sensitivity is high and the muscle cells are going to deal best with those carbohydrates. And I also make sure to keep I keep those sugars that are high glycemic out of my diet completely for the most part, and I don't even use. Generally, I'll recommend for post-training, high glycemic carbs because you want to have that big insulin response. But when you're dealing with inflammation, you don't want to do that. So deal with your health first. So keep the carbohydrates high in fiber, lower glycemic, and all of these things together can help take care of inflammation, help to bring it down, and hopefully be a preventative from having some type of disease, or even in my case, heart attack, stroke, cancer, those types of things. So it is something that can be dealt with without medication. It is something that can be dealt with supplements, the right foods, diet, exercise, and reducing stress. But it is a very, very important issue, and it is the cause of a lot of very, very bad illnesses and diseases. So definitely watch out for it.
Thanks, Biggie.